Welcome to Sex with Rebecca, a show geared towards relationships and sexuality that'll help you enjoy your relationships more than you ever thought possible. Send us your difficult questions and we'll bring you expert answers unlike anywhere else. We've been getting a lot of emails about betrayal, so today we're going to be dishing the expert scoop on why people cheat, how to recover from that, and how to affair-proof your relationship. Joining me is Mark Laing, a registered psychotherapist and couples counselor, who, like me, faces those questions every single day. Welcome, Mark. We're so fortunate to have you joining us today.
Glad to be here, of course.
Well, let's get right into it, shall we, by defining what counts as cheating. How would you define it?
Well, I have a kind of a broad definition when people ask about it, because I see people who are stepping on the marriage, with a partner. Others are also getting into pornography, things of this sort, and people saying, is that an affair, is that not an affair? So generally how I define cheating is sharing with someone else other than your partner that which belongs to your partner.
Oh, I love that, because mine's very consistent with that too. Anything that takes emotional or sexual energy away from your primary relationship counts.
Yeah.
So we're along the same lines. And of course, there's different types of cheating, as you've already touched upon it. There's the emotional affair, where you're sharing stuff that you really should be sharing with your partner. So again, consistent with what you said.
And I think all affairs start emotionally. There's some kind of missing connection they're looking for, then we'll see where it goes from there. But the only exception might be some of the sexual addiction pieces may not be so directly emotionally connected, but there is an emotion there.
There is an emotion there, but it's not the intimacy, because it is an intimacy disorder.
No.
But I think I say to people that if you are anticipating those little electronic messages and you get a charge, or you're dressing up for this person, or sharing more than you know you should, then you're in an emotional affair.
Keeping the secrets.
Keeping the secrets.
Yeah.
And then the next sort of iffy territory is cyber liaison, because we know what's fantasy, what's reality, but with cyber liaison, we're in this middle territory. So you sort of talked about pornography. What about webcam sex, or sending sexy electronic messages, sexting? According to your definition, that counts, right?
So when we look at things of that nature, when we start getting into what may possibly be termed as addiction. And so when you look at addictions in general, some things will make you high, some things will bring you down, and some things will put you in fantasy. When you get to the sexual aspects, whether it's, sex cameras or porn or whatever you're doing, the difficult thing about these parts is that those types of addictions run on all three levels.
Absolutely.
And which is probably why, people who do a lot of work with addictions will often say, out of any addiction, sexual addictions may be the toughest to stop.
Absolutely. And the other thing there too is that you're making your own drugs. So if it's alcohol, you can say, okay, I won't go to LCBO, I'm not going to go to a bar. If it's drugs, I won't go around the corner and score some drugs. But with sex addiction, you're making your own drugs. So it's definitely the hardest. And sexual addiction, I think all of us can pretty much agree what qualifies as that. So let's sort of tackle that million-dollar question. Everyone wants to know, why do people cheat? We've already talked about, when you're not feeling special at home, somebody makes you feel special, so you kind of go along there, and then it develops into more. What are some of the other reasons? Sex addiction certainly is one of them, where sex is being used like medication to numb out emotional feelings. What are some of the other reasons?
So when you look at kind of broad ones, you have kind of love addictions, you have sex addictions. With a sex addiction, the goal is the orgasm. With the love addictions, the goal is the connection. So, we mentioned earlier just about there are feelings involved with sex addictions. I would probably qualify that to say not so much emotion as there is sensation.
Sensation-based.
and that gives us a feeling of feel good. But, Adler, one of our forefathers in psychology, he said that all affairs are a form of revenge. And I kind of like that idea because, when you're thinking about someone in a situation where they're not receiving from their partner, some need is being missed. Now, they either have told their partner and their partner has fluffed it off, they've kind of told them, but in a rather indirect way, or they've been afraid to tell them. But no matter what, somebody comes along who just naturally plays into that. So, you know, if I don't get affection from my partner and somebody's fawning me and touching me all the time, oh, I like that.
Organic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with sex addiction, the entitlement piece is a major trigger. My partner is putting me down. They don't think I'm special.
Yeah.
No matter what I do, I'll never be good enough. And it resonates with how someone may have felt as a child,
Yeah.
feeling invisible, insignificant, worthless. And ding, 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 the trigger goes off. And the entitlement is, well, you know, you don't really care.
Absolutely.
And so going to that piece, it certainly ties into revenge in sort of an indirect way.
And with many sex addictions, there are certainly a number of research papers that have been written that have linked sexual addictions to a diagnosis of a borderline personality disorder. Now, I do not agree. There are some groups out there who say that all men who gravitate towards pornography are all BPDs. I don't buy that.
I've seen many who are not, but I've also
absolutely.
seen some who are.
So, but when we do come across those personality disorders, we often do see sexual addiction of some sort or other addictions. I mean, we all both know that there's usually concurrent addictions,
Yeah.
not just a addiction.
Right, and this can be this OCD component as well.
Yes.
Because sexual addiction is about compulsivity. And I'm glad you kind of made the distinction, because I certainly want our audience to know that with an affair, the person you're having an affair with is very important. With sex addiction, it's the pathological act. It's not the individual. So sometimes, you know, partners will say, how could you go after this person? They're not as attractive as I am. They're not as this, that, and the other as I am. And certainly when you look at celebrities, it doesn't make sense. But when you know that it's about the pathological act and the 3 A's, accessibility, anonymity, and affordability, and that's where the addiction grows.
I think the media has given the public the general sense that affairs are highly charged sexually. And the truth of the matter is that, you know, in my experience, you know, I've sat in my chair for over 17 years, and the thing that I see is that even ones that have sexuality involved in it, they're not nearly as sexual as people often think they are. They're not meeting every day
You're
in
right.
some seedy motel room.
Yeah. It's not sizzling
If they
hot.
are, you're
Yeah.
probably dealing with a sexual addiction.
Exactly.
You know, I've seen people who will have sex 3 times a day with 3 different people, Monday to Friday. They were on the road as salespeople or whatever. They hook up on certain
Whole
sites.
different entity.
Yes.
But you're right. You know, if you think of shows like Scandal or The Affair, it's so sexy, it's so
Right.
tantalizing. Well, coming up, how to mend a relationship after betrayal, and of course, rebuild trust and affair-proof your relationship. So be sure to stick around. Lots more good stuff coming up. Welcome back to Sex with Rebecca, geared towards making your relationships more robust than you ever thought possible. In this episode, we've been discussing betrayal with Mark Laing. Both Mark and myself are registered psychotherapists who specialize in the topic at hand, among other things. Mark, before break, we promised to get into handling the devastation from a betrayal. So let's get into the nitty-gritties of recovery and healing. Maybe starting off with 5 steps of recovery from an affair. Janice Abrams will, of course, the first one is admitting that I did this, and how it made you feel. It made you question your place in my world. It made you question your own viability in a relationship, your self-esteem and whatnot. So starting there, so what do we do next?
Well, sexuality is so tied up to our sense of value. And so the admission, but I would qualify also, we're people of a story. And we can tell a story of fact, or we can tell a story of meaning. And I watch couples as, you know, the offending partner tells the story. Often the offended party wants a story of fact. When, where, how many times, so on and so forth.
Who, with, how, and the details are dangerous because once you hear them, you can't unhear them, but they want them.
They want them, and I teach the offending partners sometimes, if they feel that the information really isn't going to help them in the healing process, to say, I'll answer any question that you give me, but I'd like you to take 24 hours to think whether or not you really want the answer to this question. And then if you do, I'll answer it. But the story of meaning, you know, because the story and the apology are so tied in together. I call them the sobbing apology, you know, just saying, yeah, I cheated, I told you everything, I'm sorry, is not going to feel warm and fuzzy.
Because you don't show that you get it. You have to show that I get your pain. I understand your pain. I feel responsible for your pain, and I hurt because you're hurting.
Yes.
So that's part of the owning, the apology.
And those two first parts, the admission and the sobbing, you know, apology,
I like that
are
sobbing.
just so, they're just so important to be able to move on and begin, you know, coming down and accepting bids from the other. And it also, once you pass those two steps, I find that it takes kind of the edges off of things. So conversation can be a little less attacking and a little more, it moves from me versus you, the problem, towards
What are
me
we
and
going
you
to
versus
do?
the problem.
Yeah, and I think that's really well put, because even in Janice's step work, she says, next thing is you sort of say, okay, how could this have happened? And it's not a blaming thing, it's really trying to identify what happened.
Yes.
And then based in that is, how are we going to see to it that it doesn't happen? Was there alcohol involved? Was there a particular individual involved? Had we drifted apart? Had we stopped communicating? What had happened with us? And then actually having a game plan where there's a way of assessing if we are on the right track. And so the we piece comes in. And certainly with sex addiction, there's a whole protocol you have to follow with respect to, you know, disclosure. Who do you tell, et cetera, et cetera, and
I know a lot
healing.
of the wives whose husbands have been caught looking at porn. Often when I'll hear them say, I almost wish he'd had an affair with, you know, the next door neighbor, because at least I could go over and knock on her door and punch her in the nose.
Yeah.
But with pornography, they're ghosts in the machine.
Right.
I don't know who they are. Of course, you know, they could be airbrushed. You know, who knows what
Yeah.
they've done with the images.
Ever willing.
But you know, they're all young, flat tummies, no, you know, stretch marks, no varicose veins, and you know, these women may have given birth to a couple of kids, and you know, that's a huge sacrifice that the woman has provided to the marriage in love and in trust. And so she feels she can't compete.
And she shouldn't have to.
She shouldn't have to, but they often feel that they have to become more provocative in the bedroom, wear more provocative clothes, go on fad diets. If he responds to it favorably, she'll be angry at him. If he doesn't respond to it, she'll be angry at him.
Exactly.
So there's no winning for her in this. And the way that women process things is they ask questions, they take his answer, they plug them into a movie reel. When they've asked all the questions, they press play. If the movie reel plays without a burp or a stutter, in other words, it makes sense, okay, I've got this, then she'll calm down. But if there's something that doesn't make sense, she's going to press stop, erase, and this is where we hear the guy say, I've answered that question a million times.
A million times,
And they
yeah.
don't understand because they interpret that as, you're calling me a liar.
Yes, but it's when you're looking at sex addiction, it is not going to make sense. Absolutely not going to make sense, because it's about a different entity altogether. So no matter what answer the person provides, and we know with sex addiction that it lives in contradictions. So these can be really great people. We
Yep.
both met lovely people, men and women who
Yep.
are addicts. They can be lovely people. They can love their partner, and they can still go and medicate using sex. And the partner says, well, if you did that, you don't love me. It would be almost easier if you were drinking or doing drugs, because it wouldn't be so personal. But it is, at the end of the
Sure
day,
it
the
is.
same mechanism. It's like
Because that component that I need to feel desired by my partner, and that when I desire them, they want that desire from me.
they want that desire.
So it's a two-way street.
Exactly. So in terms of, to move forward, we want to build trust. Trust is a whole history behind it, because, we have to sort of think back on, could we trust our parents? All the major players in our lives, have created trust issues? Have we dealt with them? What has come up right now? Is it similar? And asking questions of somebody who's cheated is absolutely a no-win situation. I'll say, are you going to believe what they're saying? No. So why do that to them or yourself? So the great little trust metric, or if you may call it a little tool that works very well for my clients, is we both love David Rico and his book on daring to trust. So looking for the 5 A's to basically be able to say, okay, my partner is present to me. So there's, are they giving me attention? Is there acceptance? Is there appreciation? Is there affection? Are they allowing me to be my authentic self? And whenever I say to people, look for those, and of course a constellation, they'll say, oh my God, when my partner wasn't cheating, right at the beginning those things were present, but when they were cheating or they were in the thick of their addiction, those things disappeared. So this gives them a tool on their own.
So the offending partner also has to apply empathy and patience. So empathy doesn't mean I agree with you. Empathy just means, gee, if I were in your shoes, I get why you think and feel that way.
Right.
The patience part, because, they may make bids towards affection. Now, when we talk about affection, we're not necessarily talking about, jumping in bed and having sex. That may be, months down the line yet.
Or a year.
But it may be, sitting and holding her hand, or just putting your hand on her leg. I teach a lot of the men and women just to come up to behind them, they're maybe at the sink, and just put their hands on their shoulder and just give it a squeeze and give them a smile and walk away.
And not sexual, not slapping someone's butt.
Right. So they're kind of like what you might do in front of the kids,
That's perfect. So it's PG, the stuff
PG.
that you might do. And I think the next thing that when we come back, I'd like to talk a little bit more about building from there, because once you've healed, you need to build. Coming up, putting everything together and having a rock solid relationship. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sex with Rebecca, a show where we bring you expert advice on critical matters to help your relationships be more intimate, exciting, and emotionally fulfilling. We've been discussing betrayal with Mark Laing, a registered psychotherapist. In our final segment, we'd like to summarize everything and leave you with not only tips to stay on track, but also provide you with a roadmap to finding that sweet spot where love and passion dance together in harmony. So let's talk about, I think one of the important things would be for anybody, it doesn't have to be betrayal, but anybody wanting to make their relationship more robust. Let's talk a little bit about emotional attunement, because it's not just about showing up, it's about showing up. So maybe you can briefly tell us what that looks like.
Well, you'd say another word for attunement is cooperation. Probably the most important skill we can teach our kids to prepare them to be future great partners is to teach them the skill of cooperation. And within that cooperation, there is a subset of descriptors called attunement. So awareness, turning towards the person, the tolerance of them, understanding that empathy piece, not responding, or I would just say reacting. It's not responding when you're reacting, and then of course.
So being responsive instead of reactive.
Right, and so we're taught to be defensive. I mean, our first intelligence was our emotions, and then when we developed words, that kind of got put on the back burner, and we placed all our emphasis on what we think and arguing. And we had to argue with our parents to get out on Friday night, and we had to argue our papers in high school, and so on and so forth. So the emphasis in communication has been towards talking. And this is a very sad thing that we've done to people, because we should really be teaching them how to listen. Because listening allows me to show empathy towards you, to turn towards you and say, gee, that sounds like you really had a rotten day. You okay?
Understand each other,
exactly.
support each other.
And allowing you to be different, right? That you don't have to vote the same party I vote. You don't have to like the same things that I like.
You don't have to agree
No.
on everything. I think that's a really good point. I remember once in Seinfeld, he found somebody who was exactly like him. So he says, oh no, I'm dating myself. And it wasn't very interesting.
But isn't that the story of narcissist? Falling in love with his own reflection. And
exactly.
And what a his life ended basically there.
Basically, yeah, how tragic that can be. And in terms of you're talking about getting defensive and, kind of making your own point. And so Dr. Sue Johnson, author of Hold Me Tight, I mean, she came up with emotionally focused therapy, which both of us use. And the focus is really how the person is responding. And one of the things that I like is, again, it's about the interaction, because she says, don't get caught up in the content tube.
Right.
If you're fighting about garbage, you're not really fighting about garbage.
The story of fact.
Exactly. So the 4 questions, which I'd say, okay, love is the foundation. The 4 questions are the 4 pillars. Are you there for me?
Right.
Will you come when I call? Do you have my back? And do I matter to you? Am I important to you? And whenever my couples, they come to me with a big fight, and I'll say, okay, show me what that looks like. And I say, okay, let's do the 4 questions. Which one of those 4 pillars was rattled? And 99% of the time, it's one of those things. Maybe they feel I don't matter to you. So it's instead of getting caught in the content.
And it's more than just asking the questions. Is the question just allows for an opening? So it goes from, the risk of it just being a yes or no answer, really developing it into a conversation of meaning.
Yes.
How will you support me?
How will you support me? Yes.
Right. If a partner has strayed, why is it that you want back in the relationship?
And that's critical, particularly with the subject that we've been discussing, because at the end of the day, it's about changing the context and knowing what each party's motivation is and how committed they are. You and I have both seen people where both parties were committed to fixing it, and they turn around, they say, twisted as this sound, this was the best thing that happened to us, because it was a wake-up call, and we're now closer than we ever were.
Now, I think an important caveat there is if a partner does stray or gets caught in pornography, that information should not be shared with family members.
I agree.
And it definitely should not be shared with the kids. The relationship with the kids, mom and dad are married, but the kids are related. It's a different relationship, and it has a different impact on them. And I have seen that when this has been breached, nothing good comes from this.
Yes.
I know the offended partner, needs to talk it out, but find people, third party, arm's
Just
length.
1 or 2. Yeah.
Yes, because I've had couples where we've got them back together, but a parent has said, well, if you go back with them, you're not welcome in the house anymore.
Right.
And the
everything
relationship was
unravels.
healed,
Yeah.
but it ends because of social pressures. And don't underestimate the power of family.
Absolutely. And it just gets really awkward. Like, if you do stay with this person, which is what we work at, we help people get back to each other and be stronger than ever. And now everybody knows, but kids are absolutely not to be told, with one exception. If someone has offended and their whatever they've done has been illegal, and this person's going to be on the 6 o'clock news, you better set the kids down before 6 o'clock and give them the heads up, because otherwise they're going to know, they're going to go to school. And again, we've been talking a lot about emotional stuff, which I like, because it's about stroking the ego at least as efficiently as stroking the libido. So how about sharing what Gottman said, and then I want to talk about a little bit about intensives to solidify. Gottman, his thing on the appreciation piece.
So the appreciation, but all of this lends to trust. Trust is not a feeling. Trust is a decision. The feeling behind trust is safety. When a partner breaches that, I may trust you if you and I were married and you cheated on me, I may trust you giving you money to go do errands, to look
Take care
after
of the
the kids,
kids.
things like this. But I may not trust you with my heart. Which means I may not trust you with my innermost thoughts, feelings, and needs, because I'm afraid that you might squish them. And that takes some time. And so you really have to kind of tear down the old structure and rebuild, almost starting the dating process all over again, right?
Absolutely.
And so in this, an appreciation for the power of a relationship needs to be made. I think, as you know, I never tell a client I work on improving the marriage. There is nothing wrong with marriage. Marriage is perfect. Its ideals are perfect. But when 2 people get married and they realize that those ideals are rather lofty, what we discover is very few of us are really prepared to be excellent partners.
And that's it, isn't it?
And that's really the key to it. So we hold things in, or we explode, we turn to addictions, we turn to almost every way we can. In physics, the law is for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Right.
Boom, away it goes.
Off it
Whereas
goes.
the law of relationships says for every action, draw closer.
Draw closer.
And that's hard to, as I say to my clients.
You have to be
it-
willing.
It doesn't matter how pretty the flower is on top of the cactus, it's hard to hug the cactus.
That's very, very well put. And I always tell my clients that it's important to think about what's good for the relationship as opposed to you or I. Because you may be really upset with your partner, especially if they're cheated, and you don't want to think about what's good for them. But if you think about what's good for the relationship, then it puts us in the us place
Right.
instead of being opposite. And before we finish, I also want to mention that I think it's a good idea for couples to do every now and again as a tune-up and intensive. I run a lot of couples intensives, Sue's model, and it's been so successful, it's translated in 171 different languages.
Yes.
And it just gives couples the opportunity to get that roadmap to loving the right way. Because most of us weren't taught how to love the right way, and we bring all the screw-ups from our families of origin and we tend to replicate them. So to break the cycle, it's good to sign up for an intensive where you can learn how to do relationships.
And it distracts them from the obsessing.
From the obsessing, because
And
now
moves
it's
them
about
towards the
building.
working.
It's
Yes.
towards it's the working, towards the building. And many people say, gee, I wish I had these tools 20, 30 years ago, and they'll end up sending their adult children because they know that we need help, and that's why what we do is so exciting and we're so passionate about it. So I'm hoping that we've given our viewers enough tools to not only move away from something as tragic as betrayal, but to actually be able to rebuild. And for those who are just maybe empty nesters or have drifted apart, to have tools where they can prioritize their relationship.
Well, and there's a thing, they've cooperated with the empty nesters. They've cooperated for years, but they haven't realized that they've grown apart. And so all the emphasis is on the children. It is the marriage that's till death us do part, not the kids.
Not the kids.
So when the kids move out, they come down and say, you look familiar. What's your name again?
What's your name again?
And so you see a blip in the divorce rate around 25 years, which coincides with a lot of empty nesting.
And that's what we have to be mindful of. For a step-by-step guide on everything we've discussed and more, you can grab a copy of my latest book, Overcoming Betrayal, which is touted as truly transforming, because it's the first book ever that looks at things from both sides, the betrayer as well as the person who was betrayed. Thank you so much, Mark, for enlightening us, and viewers for joining us. Be sure to tune in again next week, and don't forget to email us your questions on any and everything to do with sex and relationships. I'm Rebecca Rosenblat, your host, wishing you happy, healthy, and passionate relationships. Until next time.